the blue fuck was that?
Resident Evil.
Guys, I had an absolute blast during my time with this game. As a fan of the series since its debut in 1996, I've come to experience all the horrific, head-scratching and often bizarre storytelling from one of the most popular gaming series in history. And now 25 years on, we have Resident Evil Village, the 8th official mainline title from Capcom to debut on the 9th generation of consoles. Now then, for the past 2 weeks, I've done very little else except for sit on my ass with the curtains drawn, rinsing this game dry in preparation for this review. Bye bye life, hello Village. I didn't expect this game to be this big, you know. I knew we were getting something on a larger scale than what we got in 7, but the amount of content, locales, enemies and story intrigue on offer here really made me feel this game's sense of scale, you know, and made for one hell of a first playthrough, I can tell you that, which incidentally took me around about 18 hours or so. But as is the case with Resident Evil titles, once you start working the game out, it shouldn't take you much more than a couple of hours to fly through the entire game, you know, via your speed runs, your knife runs and infinite ammo runs. And it's through these extra playthroughs that you really do start to see the game's weaknesses. Nothing will ever beat that first run through though, and it's through this particular run that I'll be basing most of this review on. Let me run through my settings before I get too carried away here, because there's a lot I want to discuss, and while I can't talk about every nook and cranny in this particular video, I'd be more than happy to make an extended review or discussion video for Village should this review get enough likes, so please remember to like and share the video if you do enjoy it, and hey, subscribing is free by the way, just saying. Guys, I've been playing Village via the PlayStation 5 console, and with that I've been using the DualSense adaptive triggers throughout my multiple playthroughs. And I've also gone through with both HDR and ray tracing modes on to get the most out of the games as well as my LG OLED TV's graphical capabilities. And I've gone even further by utilising the official PS5 Pulse headset with surround sound turned on in the game settings. And my god guys, my god, this game looks truly beautiful, and this might be the best looking game I've ever played, honestly. Everything just looks so authentic. I was so impressed with the game's HDR and ray tracing capabilities that I would just walk around, you know, even during backtracking segments, just so I could take it all in and create a more cinematic experience for myself, which really wasn't difficult given the RE engine's ever-evolving capabilities. I never got tired of seeing the small things, you know, like the light bouncing off a dark wet wall for example, or the environment's lighting reflecting off my weapon. Everything is just so juicy and delicious to behold here. It oozes immersion. The character models in the game also look fantastic, and that goes for the facial animations and lip syncing as well. I mean, I'm talking as close to realism as you can get right now. The way Dimitrescu's daughters, for example, move and interact with you during the game's story, or the snarling, drooling, ice-cold aggression coming from a Lycan's mouth. This all made me forget I had a controller in my hand. The use of HDR, ray tracing and next-gen hardware were also well implemented in Village that I genuinely felt I was playing a VR game at times. And I know that may sound cheesy and over the top here, but I'm telling you, with the setup and settings I had running for this game, it didn't take me long at all to get fully immersed. However, there are moments throughout where the game drops frames, and this is to be expected from favouring graphical fidelity over frame rates, of course. And there are plenty of times where you'll notice the environment clip into scene before your very eyes, which can be a bit distracting, but these minor blemishes didn't really deter me from enjoying the game. I was just surprised that we're still seeing this kind of shit on the 9th generation of consoles, but it's early days, I guess? When it comes to the game's sound design, Jesus guys, you know what I'm talking about. Let's just take it as read that Village has everything down in terms of environmental sound effects, because it really does. You know, walking on snow, wood or carpet for example, it's all present and correct. The whistling of the wind from atop the ever-present Castle Dimitrescu, or the drips from a distant leak in the deep dark caves, you know, all these little things add tremendously to the game's immersion, especially if you're using a decent headset. However, the sound truly takes front and centre during particular tense moments throughout the game. That whole bit where you're walking through the snow in pitch black with the lichens snarling all around you, for example. Even though just through my 30 years of gaming experience I didn't expect any physical danger at this point, the gradual escalation of threatening sounds alone was enough to make me think twice, you know. And from a veteran's perspective, that's pretty darn impressive. From a combat standpoint, the weapons in the game do have some level of oomph to them, but the satisfaction for me really comes from the various enemies in the game that you use these weapons on. You know, foes such as this hairy bastard, the many lichens in the game, or Maru's absolute guttural dialogue, you know. All these things do a great job in bringing the world closer to the player. And speaking of dialogue, the voice acting in the game is great as well, and I honestly didn't expect any less from what Capcom have produced in recent years. You know, we've come a long way from...
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Ethan is the best example of this. He's a far more fleshed out character in Village than he was in 7, and that's because there's just a more wide variety of scenarios for him to react to. And because of this, there are moments via his dialogue throughout the game where I genuinely believed his pain, confusion, and frustration. It's all very top-notch stuff here.
This is just too much. I just don't get it. Why the fuck is this happening again? Shit!
First, let me discuss the loading times in Village. There are none. Love it. Moving on. As far as actual gameplay is concerned though, there's been a significant improvement from 7. For starts, the story takes you to more varied locations, which aids tremendously when keeping the player's interest intact. I mean, you've got the ever-present gothic Dimitrescu castle that's pretty much its own character here. I mean, you see this thing pretty much everywhere you go, you know, just looming in the distance. It's great. But then you've got a secluded, creepy house to explore, a large industrial factory to escape from. There's a lot to keep the player intrigued here. There's also plenty of optional and hidden areas to explore outside of the main story, where you'll find hidden documents, goats of warding, which act as the new Mr. Bobbleheads. But then the game goes even further, with lots of different treasures and currencies to accumulate that you can eventually trade with the friendly merchants, who will offer you supplies, upgrades and tasty dishes from your hunting trips that give you more health and movement speed. Just a side note here, man, I hated the first time, and I say this loosely, that I hunted my first animal. It just wouldn't die, you know. But from then on, as long as it was a full-fledged big ass animal, it was a single bullet to the head via the sniper rifle. Chickens, you know, you can cut chickens up with your knives, that thing, and that's fine. But even the way these animals die, from the chickens to the goats, you know, it's horrible, man. I hate killing animals in games. The gunplay is great, especially when using the PS5's adaptive triggers, and for the first time in years, you now don't have to bother shooting enemies directly in the head for the most effective takedown, as they'll now die from a set amount of damage, rather than just relying heavily on adaptive difficulty, you know. I wasn't sure what I thought about this at first, but as the game goes on, you quickly realise that because of the sheer volume of enemies that stand in your way throughout the campaign, it makes more sense for Capcom to allow body shots to be just as effective as headshots, you know. This is definitely more of an action horror title than a survival one. So shoot away, because it won't cost you much. Another thing Village does way better than 7 is the different enemy types. My god, something a lot of us were hoping for. There are now over 10, yes 10, enemy types in Village, as opposed to 7's measly 4. And these range from the aforementioned lichens to these mechanical animals, which, I'm sorry, come straight from Star Trek's The Borg.
Lower your weapons.
They'll ignore us till they consider us a threat.
On the subject of enemies, and this is a big problem I had with the game, there are many moments in Village where you really don't have to worry too much, because a lot of times these nasty, scary, grotesque monsters have boundaries, where you can either just run right past them, run inside a house, or more cases than not, walk past an invisible line, and they'll just be like, oh, hang about, I ain't going over there, mates, and just start heading back to their original position, throwing any kind of threat out the window. And you could just start manipulating this to your own advantage, It's a huge issue, especially when it comes to both immersion and horror. Boss fights are enjoyable, but nothing to write home about, really. What I appreciate is that each boss fight feels different from the last, with their own unique play area and weaknesses. The segment with Donna's doll, for example, where you have to find that one specific doll, all the while working against a time limit, was well received. I just appreciated how the game switches things up and works slightly different areas of your brain. There's a hefty amount of puzzles in the game, which I do appreciate, but at the same time I gotta say it quite lightly, because most are applicable for 5-year-olds, you know what I'm talking about. But there were a couple that had me genuinely scratching my head, especially during that Donna's house bit, which incidentally reminded me of that segment with Lucas Baker in 7. But for the majority, you tend to find keys and important items, that kind of thing, as you follow the main path. So you won't ever really find yourself lost, not unless you're this panicky fucker, in which case, good luck with that. One thing I did get spot on in my first impressions video, and it's no surprise really, was the amount of hand-holding in the game. Enemies will let you know they're dead by dropping big white icons on the floor, indicating to you that they've left you something, and these same icons appear from miles away, and through walls to boot. It's like, it's safe to step over me now, mate, and just in case you didn't want to find out for yourself, there's a secret item hidden over here as well. And that's thanks to you, casuals. And as far as bugs or glitches go, I haven't really found any, apart from one which probably ended up being my fault really. But I had one of the flying enemies stuck beneath me during that castle section. I could still hit it and ended up killing it in the end, but apart from that, I personally didn't come across anything too strenuous.
Gifts we gave, but more you took, she snarled. So more in turn is due. In a blink, the girl was trapped inside a mirror. There. She's asleep.
Following a 3-year break from the events in 7, Ethan and Mia are hidden away with the help of Chris Redfield somewhere in Europe with their newborn baby, Rose. Now everything is peaches and cream until Chris suddenly decides to have Mia killed before taking off with Rose and our main protagonist, and it's up to the player to find Rose, all the while making sense of the situation. Now, I enjoyed the story, for the most part, and this is one reason I'd like to make an extended review of the game. There's a lot I'd like to touch on, but for now, I liked how it tied in naturally with 7. I liked how certain things were explained, such as Lady Dimitrescu's affliction, or more excitingly, Oswald Spencer's inspiration from Miranda's parasite research. I thought as a whole, it was an engrossing story. I mean, there's a lot of characters for you to meet in this game, and they're all interesting. But the story, it was bizarre, familiar, and silly as I expected and wanted it to be. But there are things which are clearly left unexplained for either the next game, convenience, or for just lack of planning. But all the characters in the game, as alluded to earlier in the review, are great. I mean, you've got Lady Dimitrescu for a start. She's certainly a highlight.
So we finally meet.
Oh shit. But then you've got completely different vibes with Heisenberg, Moreau, and Donna, the latter having probably the smallest role in the game out of the 4 main houses. Chris Redfield is the fucking man in this game. I really enjoyed Chris's time on screen. He felt like an event on that first playthrough anyway. I felt he was portrayed very well given his history with the series, what he's done, what he's been through, etc.
You stay out of our business, Ethan.
What business?
God, watch out!
And as previously mentioned in the review, the main protagonist Ethan was just cranked up to 11 in this game, so much so that he's gradually becoming an actual favourite of mine in the series, but that's not hard when you've got a bunch of classic characters either dead, altered in some way, shape or form, or just haven't seen the light of day in the series in years and years, There's just more realistic acknowledgement of the crazy, horrific, and where applicable, heartbreaking moments that come from his time in the game, you know. And because of this, his apparent climax in the game genuinely struck a chord with me, and I can be a tough mother trucker to break at the best of times.
Here I come. Your time is up! Now die!
Now, as great as Resident Evil 7 was, what with its satisfying gameplay, amazing atmosphere, and terrifying scenarios, Village brings with it far more spectacle, but at the cost of that sense of helplessness and dread, all the while improving on 7's lack of enemy types, gunplay, and puzzle play. There's just so much more to see, do, and experience in Village that I feel it does a far better job in grabbing your balls, squeezing them, and threatening to pop them should you leave your seating position, you know, or something to that effect. You know what I'm talking about. Now, with all this being said, Resident Evil Village gets an 8 out of 10 from me. It's worth any horror fan's time and money, hands down. It falls short on terror, but delivers more on spectacle and variety, so there's a bit of a balancing act here. Now, I've yet to play the Mercenaries, and let's just forget about RE-verse. But with the inclusion of the former, as well as unlockable difficulty modes, the many weapons and infinite ammos to unlock through multiple playthroughs, I really do believe this game gives you some bang for your buck. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review on Resident Evil Village. Please remember to give this video a like if you did enjoy it, and if we reach, let's say, 15 somewhere, let's go for 15 likes. Let's say 15 likes as a milestone on this video. I'll go ahead and make that extended Village review and go proper balls deep into the game's nooks and crannies. Alright, it'll be a good one, but let's get to 15 likes if we can. Now, also please remember to subscribe for more content like this and to further support the channel, of course. It really means a lot to me. But for now, thank you all very much once again, and I'll see you all on the next video.